I was born in the middle of World War II in 1944 in New Orleans, Louisiana. That means in January of 2026, I will be 82 years old. I started my career before many of you listeners and viewers probably had your parents born. So, talking about my career, how I got here, does require that I point out that I grew up in very different times than the times we're living in now. Where there are common elements are, however, that I am from a family that has spent a lot of time thinking about health. My father and my grandfather were both physicians. They were African American physicians in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century when many of the problems that had been a part of slavery were finally being resolved for African Americans in the United States. As doctors, as physicians, working in very impoverished communities, my grandfather worked in Mississippi, my dad worked in Louisiana and in the New York metropolitan area in New Jersey. They were both not just interested in medical care for their patients, they also had to pay particular attention to the nature of the communities where their patients lived. This is based on something that is fundamental to public health, that our health isn't just a function of our bodies, it's not just a function of how we behave with our bodies. Some of what happens to us is a literal and very important function of where we live. What happens in the communities around us, what happens to the people that we are living with, often will create impacts on us that will be translated in one form or other into health or disease. My father and grandfather were aware of this, so they treated patients, but they were sensitive to all the things in the environment, all the things in the community that might also impact an individual's health. I grew up with that sensitivity. So in 1986, a good little while ago, 40 some odd years ago, I became interested with Mindy Thompson Fullilove in what was happening in the health of the United States around the issue of HIV/AIDS. This was a new viral pandemic that at that moment in the 1980s was something that we had never seen before in the United States. It became evident that many of the people who were impacted, many of the people who were infected with this new virus, were people who lived in the neighborhoods where we worked. Mindy Thompson Fullilove is an MD psychiatrist. She's a physician as well as a psychiatrist. She was very interested not just in the fact that people were getting sick, she was interested in the fact that they were largely likely to be sick in certain neighborhoods in urban areas that were different than other urban area neighborhoods. HIV in the 1980s in the United States was a very urban disease. The fact that it was in cities and not in the country, not in rural areas, was a clue. The fact that when you went to cities where there were people living with HIV, they weren't all randomly distributed in neighborhoods in these cities. They tended to be in certain kinds of communities, communities that were poor, communities that were typically communities of people of color. And there were communities where there were high rates of things like drug use. So, understanding that some of what was making people sick had to do with exposures that were present in these communities, we started to do work together that looked at the relationship between illness on the one hand and the built and social environment on the other. My path to the position that I hold now at Columbia is one that began with this fascination, this engagement on the part of members of my family, my grandfather and my father, in things that connected medicine, health to communities. Suddenly discovering in 1986, almost 40 years ago, that HIV/AIDS was a community that seemed to involve individuals, an illness, and exposures that happened in the communities. And since 1986, I've been embarked on the journey that has led me to be a professor and a dean at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University in New York. That is a long answer to your question, but I hope it gives you some sense of how, in terms of my career, I started out from an interesting background to arrive at the point that I'm in professionally at this moment.
Yes, sir, it's interesting. I want to know more about you.
So, what
You,
can I say more about me? Would you like me to say more?
sir, looking back at your career, the profile you have shared me, I read out it and I found that you have a belonging with advocacy as well. So, in your early career, what moment happened that your passion is moving towards community health and advocacy?
So, advocacy was very much a part of my life in my 20s when I was very much engaged in the United States civil rights movement. This was a movement that was basically advocating that people of color should have the same rights in a democracy as white people. I was, for 4 years of my young life, very heavily engaged in civil rights campaigns, which were advocacy projects designed to promote the idea that human rights and civil rights were something that should be a part of our American democracy. And in order for that part to be realized, in order for it to have some kind of impact, it would mean that groups like African Americans who didn't in the 1960s enjoy those rights should be provided with the resources to have all that a democratic republic promises to its citizens. So, advocating that the rights of a democracy should be the rights of the community that I grew up in, that was a most important part of my history of advocacy. And it led me to do a variety of really interesting things in the state of Mississippi in 1964 and 65, as well as in New York State when I worked actively for a civil rights organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So that's my history of advocacy. And that's my history of advocacy that tied me to the health and the well being of communities where that kind of advocacy was hopefully going to bring about a change in access to civil rights.
Interesting, sir. I want to know how do you see the world today? How do you define community health in today's world, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic reshaped global perspectives? So, how do you define health in today's world?
Yeah, COVID 19 did a great deal to impact health worldwide. And part of what I think I am aware of is that pandemics, large scale problems with health that are created by our interactions with the natural world, with viruses, that we will probably have more encounters. There will be more pandemics in the future. And that part of those of us who work in public health, part of our job is to make sure that we do a job of preparing everybody for what we know is going to be a time when greater risks that come from pandemics are likely to be visited on all of us. So, what do we do to make sure that we are safe? What do we do to make sure that we and our loved ones are protected? Seems to me that that is a really important agenda item for all of us, which is why I'm very happy to be speaking to you about these things today.
Okay, sir. Sir, moving forward, I want to know what do you see as the most pressing public health challenges facing marginalized communities in America or all over the world?
I believe that a problem that we have discussed earlier is the big one. And this is climate change and the way it will impact the health of everyone worldwide. I think the most immediate impact of climate change is what happens when we see more and more hurricanes and tornadoes in my part of the world, here in the Western Hemisphere, when we see rises in temperature that will change the relationship that human beings have with their biodiverse animal neighbors, when we start to see situations where rising waters and temperatures that make some parts of the earth inhospitable will force people to leave lands that they've occupied for hundreds, if not thousands of years, forcing them to leave to seek safer places so that the problems that have altered and changed their environment aren't problems that will ultimately overtake and kill them. So that there will be widespread population displacement as our problems with the climate become more and more severe. I think that that is one of the most severe problems that faces the health of planet Earth in the future. And it is a problem that I'm hoping human beings will still have time and opportunity to help prevent.
Uh, so that's really great to talk to you. Uh, as you know, we are in the world where AI replaces every sector of our life. Either robots are coming on the places of human. So, do you think envision of AI being used to improve public health outcomes?
Yes, I am just returned from a trip to India, to Mumbai, where I was privileged to be present at a school that is very interested in improving nutrition for young people in India by improving the quality of their diet. These are young people who want to be actively engaged in doing the kinds of things that will help ensure that they and their family members will all have access to the kinds of meals that will promote health and prevent disease. As a way of creating an educational campaign that is designed to help young school children in India learn more about diet and nutrition and the path to public health, they produced a song using artificial intelligence, as well as a bunch of materials that are all designed to go into schools to help create awareness of all the things that we must do to make sure that we have access to and are able to prepare healthy meals. That this was all done with artificial intelligence, that a group of children aged 12 were able to produce something that was flashy, that was professional, that was well done, and that was engaging. Made me believe that the future of educational innovation in the area of public health and nutrition might be a future that will be made that much more promising and that much more profitable in terms of its outcomes by using artificial intelligence and other technologies to help us shape the content of our message, to help us get that message to people who are in a position to hear it and act upon it. And it will also help us assess and evaluate how effective our efforts would be. So I do, in fact, see that technology, but most especially in the form of accessible AI, will be the wave of the future, that it will be a much needed pillar in our efforts to strengthen our ability to provide health education content to many people in many communities around the world. It is not without its problems. I worry a great deal about the environmental impact of using AI a great deal. The data farms that make AI possible are often a very huge problem for the environment. And I worry that there are some users of AI that not only are problematic, they're absolutely downright dangerous because they can do things to create images, to create sounds, to create data that have the capacity to fool, to bewitch, to bewilder, and to ultimately render bad information so accessible that it becomes a problem, not a solution. So that there are good sides to AI has something that I think we have to be absolutely at our best to make sure that we develop it well, but that there are also problems associated with it, I think is also important. I see it as the wave of the future. I do not know how we will avoid a world that won't be more and more impacted, if not controlled by AI. And while I welcome some of the positive changes it will bring, I'm also sober enough to point out that there are negative elements to this as well that I think are likely to be the legitimate cause for worry on the part of all of us.
Yes, sir, you're right. There are some bad effects of AI as well. As you know, AI can help us to reduce the health disparities. On the other hand, there are some myths related to AI. People in our area like used to say that they don't have to do MRI; it could cause cancer, or some doctors didn't prefer X-rays to the younger ones. They prefer to the X-rays to those who are 40 plus. So, do you think it is risk? There is risk in AI, or the myths that in the mind of people are right or not?
Well, as is true with so much of technology, there is a very large amount of information that is now circulated about what AI is and what it is not. The parts that are accurate when it comes to medicine do reflect how we are increasingly finding that we can do a better job of diagnosing some illnesses, especially if we are using electronic technology to help us scan and measure and assess what's happening with a patient. That when we generate a great deal of data like that, AI can do a magnificent job of sharpening our diagnostic abilities and can even make a correct and accurate diagnosis where human doctors cannot. So that it is a potential absolute boon to medical care cannot be denied. But there are also, of course, again, problems that also can't be ignored. And some of those problems have to deal with the fact that, as is true with any bit of technology, the results that we get from feeding AI data are only as good as the data that we give it. If you use bad data as a way of diagnosing what's happening with a patient, if what you are providing are information about the patient that is not correctly collected or that is in some way uh, containing errors that we haven't quite caught, then AI does not know the difference between good data and bad data. It will do the job of analyzing what we give, but its results will be biased. Its results will be distorted in some way because it was working on information that was less than perfect. So, are there problems with AI? Yes, there are. And some of those problems have a great deal to do with what happens if it's used incorrectly. Are there myths about AI? Yes, there are. There are people who believe it is more powerful than it actually is. We have not gotten to the stage yet where AI can think independently and behave exactly like a human being. People who believe that it's about to take over the world, that it represents the embodiment of evil because it is now an artificial thinking machine. Many of the pieces of misinformation that circulate around all of us have to do with people taking these myths about AI and speaking about artificial intelligence as if those myths are actually true. And to that degree, misinformation about AI is misleading and it's actually wrong. So I think to sum up, there are elements of AI, its use in public health, its use in medicine, that are definitely quite promising. And that promise will translate to better diagnoses and maybe even better paths to what we hope will be cures for many of the ailments that have beset mankind since our beginnings. But that there are negative elements to AI, yes, there are definitely problems associated with its use. And that there's a great deal of information circulating about AI, yes, that's true as well. So I'm hoping that podcasts like yours are going to be efforts where people are able to sort of talk truthfully about the pluses and minuses associated with AI, and where it's possible for you to show people this is wrong, this is a myth, this is misinformation. I think you're in a position to do a great service. AI is going to be in our future. So the best way to make sure that it is a future that we are happy with is to do what we can to be well informed about it and using our level of understanding about it to serve as a guide for making sure that when it is used properly and ethically.
100% I agree with you, sir. Sir, I'm also a student of public health. I'm pursuing my career in public health. So currently, we are doing research that all the issues of public health are mostly related to climate change. So, do you think that climate change directly affect public health?
Yes. As I said earlier, climate change will affect many things about the biosphere that all of us live in. We are not the only living creatures on Earth. We interact with everything in Mother Nature. Climate change affects Mother Nature. It affects the nature of the environment that we're in, and our interactions with that environment will change as climate change. does the job of altering many of the conditions that are currently providing us with life. When climate change starts to threaten those conditions in a variety of ways, it will have an impact on all of us. And some of those impacts undoubtedly will be with health. We're going to see more diseases related to heat. We're going to see more diseases related to things like insects. When it becomes clear that in some parts of the country, climate change will make certain kinds of mosquitoes and other kinds of vermin more prevalent. If those problems, if those problem creatures are carrying microbes that can be harmful for human beings, their ascendancy because of changes in the climate will mean that we're going to have more challenges to face. And there's just no question in my mind that we are looking at a time when, if we're not controlling climate change, many of the problems, many of the challenges that we have in public health are going to get that much more serious and that much more problematic.
Uh, I agree, sir. Sir, I want an advice for myself and for the young people and students as well. How can young people and students contribute meaningfully to reduce health disparities in their local communities? Because urban areas are well settled, they have, they have the resources as compared to the rural areas. So how can they reduce health inequalities?
I believe that young people who are able to use technology so that they're available to interact with us on this podcast are people who have access to a very important tool for keeping communities informed. I believe that young people who are very able to use modern technology to keep current on what's happening around them, who are able to use it as a tool of communication so that they are able to connect with themselves as well as with others in the community. I believe that at a moment when much of what we do is guided by the quality of the information we get, anyone who's tied into information technology, as you are, is in a position to really help make sure that what we know about medicine, public health, and the problems we all face, if what we know is something that we are in a position to share with each other, if in sharing that information we are able to take action that will protect us, that will keep us sane, happy, and relatively safe, then I believe that we are in a position to offer a real asset to life in the community. Young people who are connected to information sources, who can teach, who can inform, who can let people know when problems are arising that require us to take action. I believe that all of that represents an important service that young people are in a unique position to provide with their communities. And I think the better informed we are, the greater the likelihood that we will survive what I see is a coming period of time when we're going to be all challenged very greatly by the things that are going to be changing all around us. The more we're informed, the better able we'll be to protect ourselves against what I see as, once again, a very difficult time, probably coming in the near future.
Sir, you have a great history in public health as a public health leader. So, looking back at your career, what are some lessons that you would like to pass on the next generation of public health leaders?
That whatever we learn in our experience providing public health service to communities, we owe it to the generation behind us to teach the lessons that will help us sustain whatever progress we've made. I am still actively teaching classes because I believe that informing people about all the things that I've learned over a long set of years in professional life, there's an important way in which I connect the past to the present and help us prepare for the future. So this idea that I'm someone who's committed to being an educator, who's committed to doing what I can to keep people well informed, I'm hoping that my particular way of using what I do in public health as a way of teaching others will be an example that all of you are going to be able to follow in your own careers. We are not just hoping to be effective in the jobs that we're doing. We're hoping that our effectiveness is something that we can teach to others. If we are successful, and helping other people learn from us, learn from our good times as well as from our mistakes, I believe that in the end, future generations will thank us because they'll benefit from having so much been a part of participating in the benefits that come from all the things that we've learned doing this kind of work and trying to pass on the knowledge of doing this work to others.
Okay, sir. Sir, if you could leave our listeners with one message or one call to action, what would it be?
I believe that in the face of difficult times, now is the time to not give up hope, but to continue to move and to struggle on. I believe that we as human beings are born to do better. We are born to progress. We are born to overcome the difficulties that face us. But we must keep the faith that what we are doing will have positive results. We cannot give up hope. So if there's one message that I think it's important to leave, it is simply this: we have to keep going.
Okay, sir. Moving forward, let's play a game and then we will end up our session. So, the name of the game is Brain on the Run. I have three questions for you, and you have 3 seconds to answer each question. Okay? Question one: your favorite city to walk in?
Paris.
A book that changed your perspective?
Wretched of the Earth.
Your favorite place to think or reflect?
My favorite plans to think and reflect.
Yes.
Morning. I'm a morning thinker, reflector, and meditator.
Okay. Now this and that. Salad or pizza?
Oh, pizza.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Early bird or night owl?
Oh, early bird.
Serious professor or funny storyteller?
Oh, serious professor.
Student excuses or admin emails? Which one's worse?
Student excuses.
If public health was a movie, it would drama or comedy?
Today, comedy in the United States.
Cats or dogs?
Oh, dogs.
Texting or talking?
Talking.
Fame or legacy?
Oh, legacy.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It's truly an honor to host you, and I express my heartfelt gratitude to you on the behalf of Gen I. Thank you so much for your precious time and your presence.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy. Have a great day.
Great day, sir.